You know, it's been a common quarrel between 4Runner enthusiasts on which 4Runner is the best 4Runner. Now, the 4th gen has always been the runt of the group, but honestly, I think any 4Runner is a good 4Runner. So this 4Runner in particular is a 2005 V6 Limited, the 4th generation of 4Runner. And here's a quick history lesson about it. It all started back in 1981 when Toyota partnered with Winnebago, that's right, the people that made the RVs, and then they made the Trekker. So it was a Toyota pickup with a fiberglass shell, and I think it had rear seats in it, and that's it. And then in 1984, Toyota released the all-new 4Runner that competed with the Jeep Cherokee and the Ford Bronco too. It was pretty much a Toyota pickup truck with a roll bar, a fiberglass shell, and rear seats, and that's it. In 1986, Toyota did their biggest leap in the truck segment by switching from a solid front axle suspension to an independent front suspension in their 4Runner and their trucks. It made the 4Runner and the pickup drive a lot better on the road, but it also didn't sacrifice too much off-road ability either. In 1987, Toyota offered an optional 3-liter V6, also known as the 3-point slow or the 3-point blow, because they're slow and they blow head gaskets. And then in 1990, the all-new 2nd generation 4Runner came out with 4 doors, but Toyota did offer a 3-door version for a few years in the early 90s. 2nd gen 4Runners were bigger, and they also offered a 2.4-liter 4-cylinder or a 3-liter V6, just like the last generation. In 1996, Toyota brought the 3rd generation 4Runner, one of the most off-road capable 4Runners pretty much in existence, because it had an optional rear e-locker, and its small and nimble size made it perfect for any trail. Toyota also axed the 2.4 and the 3-liter for a 2.7-liter 4-cylinder and a 3.4-liter V6, both really robust engines for their time, and even nowadays. In 2003, Toyota brought the all-new 4th generation 4Runner, which was even bigger and a little bit rounder to compete with the Honda Pilot, Ford Explorer, Nissan Pathfinder, and all those mid-size SUVs of the early 2000s. They ditched the 3.4-liter and the base 4-cylinder for this 4-liter V6, the same one that you'll find in the 2nd gen Tacoma and the Toyota FJ Cruiser. The 4th gen 4Runner was also known to be a little bit more car-like because they drove a lot better than 3rd gens on the road, but they were still very off-road capable even in their stock configuration. But they did get rid of the e-locker for the 4th gen. Until 2009, when Toyota released a trail edition for the 4Runner that did bring that e-locker back, but that was only 1 year, and those are really rare. The 4th gen 4Runner was also the first 4Runner to offer an optional 3rd row, which was pretty teeny tiny even to nowadays standards, well, especially to nowadays standards. And it also offered an optional 4.7-liter V8, which made 270 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. And that also brought its towing capability to 7,000 pounds from 5,000 in the V6. 2010 brought the all-new 5th generation 4Runner, the Overlander's Dream, which was even bigger and bulkier than the 4th gen 4Runner. It offered a crazy amount of off-road tech like crawl control, a new form of A-Track, Toyota's active traction control system, and so much more. And in 2015, Toyota added the TRD Pro, which was the most off-road capable 4Runner from the factory. And every year after the TRD Pro has been released, Toyota has added a new color for the TRD Pro lineup. In 2015, we got Inferno Orange. In 2016, we got Quicksand. In 2017, we got Cement. In 2018, we got Calvary Blue. In 2019, we got Voodoo Blue. And then for 2020, now we have Army Green. This is an 05 4Runner V6 Limited 4x4. The Limited trim offered standard leather seats, heated front seats, a more powerful JBL audio system, and illuminated running boards. V6 4-wheel drive 4Runners had a part-time 4-wheel drive system with a limited slip and lockable center diff. 4Runners of this vintage also were able to get an optional sat-nav system. The 4th gen is known to be one of the rounder, sportier looking 4Runners in the lineup. This one particularly is a pre-refresh 4th gen, so it has a bit more of a bulbous front bumper and halogen reflector headlights, while younger years got projector beam halogen headlights. Most 4Runners that you'll see will probably have these 17-inch alloy wheels, and ours happen to come with some meaty all-terrain tires too. 4-wheel drive 4Runners get 9.1 inches of stock ground clearance. That's not too bad. And you know one of the best features of any 4Runner? The sliding glass rear window. This is literally the ultimate dog car. Another cool thing about 4th gen 4Runners is that they have a soft closed trunk, so you don't have to slam it. Behind that glass is a pretty cavernous trunk with this neat parcel shelf that goes up and down, and the 4Runner has 40.6 cubic feet of volume. Now, coming from a 3rd gen 4Runner, the 4th gen is obviously more focused for comfort and space, with the interior being more plush and spacious than 4Runners of the past. For this 4Runner in particular, the interior has held up okay. A common issue for 4th gen 4Runners is that the dash cracks, and ours happens to have cracked. Toyota did offer a recall to replace your dash, but unfortunately that thing ended in 2017, so we're overdue on that, so we can't even do it. Another thing that's worn out are the seats. They've just torn just a little bit, but they still offer decent support even to this day. One problem that I do have with the driving position is that I feel like I'm sitting more on top of the 4Runner more than inside of it, just because I feel like I'm close to the ceiling. I'm 5'8", I'm not even that tall, but it's just kind of that illusion. Other than that, I really like the ergonomics of the interior. I like the steering wheel. It's a 4-spoke leather-wrapped steering wheel. You have volume controls on it. You also have automatic lights on the Limited, which is a nice feature. And then this one does have the JBL audio system, which sounds pretty good actually. But in 2020, I do like my Apple CarPlay, so if this was my truck, I would definitely upgrade this to a CarPlay compatible unit. You also have dual zone climate control, and one problem I have is when you first get one of these, trying to figure out how the climate control works is a little bit complicated, just because there's so many buttons and they all do different things. So if you're just trying to look to increase the driver's temperature, you kind of have to really look at it and then you'll figure it out. But after you get used to it, it's not that bad at all. 4-wheel drive 4Runners also get downhill assist control, which helps the truck go down steep hills. And then, since this is a V6 4Runner, it has a part-time 4-wheel drive system. So how it works is, in 2-wheel drive, you could switch to 4-wheel drive while you're moving. But if you want real 4-wheel drive, you can either lock the center differential, or in normal 4-high without the center diff locked, the basic torque transfer is 60 to the rear and 40 to the front. Also, of course, like any other truck, you have 4-low, which works really well in these. Sitting in the back seat of a 4th gen is a noticeable improvement from a 3rd gen. The only complaint I have in a 4th gen is that my knees are a little bit too high, so the seat cushion is a little bit too low for me, but I do have great legroom. I'm 5'8", like I said, and maybe 3-4 inches of legroom, and my feet can fit under the seats. And also, you have climate vents for the rear. There's no 3rd zone for the climate, but it is nice that you have vents in the back. And then you also have a big armrest with 2 cup holders and a little tray that you could put your phone or something in. But it is nice that Toyota put a bigger armrest and just made the rear seat of the 4Runner a lot more accommodating for the 4th gen year. So this engine is the 1GR FE 4-liter V6. It was all new for 2003 for the 4Runner, and it puts out 245 horsepower and 282 pound-feet of torque. Those are still pretty beefy numbers even to nowadays standards. And back in 2003 when this engine first came out, it was a huge improvement from the 190 horsepower 4Runner of yesterday. Back in 2005, these were rated at 17 miles per gallon in the city and 21 on the highway, which are kind of piggish numbers, but it was still an improvement from the last generation 4Runner before this one. Another big difference between a 3rd gen and a 4th gen is just how they drive. The 3rd gen really drives like a pickup. It feels just like my own Toyota Tacoma from 1997. But the 4th gen, of course, it does still feel a bit like a truck. You know, the steering is kind of slow, but it's nothing that I'm not used to. It does drive, you know, a little bit harder than something like a Highlander or a Pilot, of course. It's just a lot more refined than the 3rd gen 4Runner. One thing that surprised me the first day I drove this 4Runner a few months ago was how tight the turning radius was. I was turning around in a parking lot or backing into my driveway, and I was blown away with just how sharp it turned. It turned tighter than my Volvo S60. Even to this day, this 2005 4Runner with 220,000 miles feels like it just rolled off the dealership lot. It does rattle a little bit in some things, like the trunk shelf in the back when it's up. It'll rattle just a little bit, I guess because it's not exactly sealed. So I'm on this straight road, and let's see. I mean, like, of course, it's not fast, but it definitely feels adequate for, you know, daily driving. Now, this is the 245 horsepower V6. If you do want some stump pulling torque, stump pulling, you could get the 4.7 liter V8, which made 270 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. So if you wanted to pull something or just have that extra power, definitely go for the V8. Another alternative to a V8 4Runner is the Lexus LX 470. That was pretty much the same thing as a V8 4Runner, just as a Lexus. And you get a little bit better quality materials and also air suspension on some models, which could be a little bit iffy. But GX 470s are getting a little bit more popular every day in the overlanding community. We owned a 3rd gen, and this is definitely a lot more refined and just more comfortable because it's roomier, and then also it's just bigger and a little bit heavier, so it rides a little bit smoother, and the steering is a little bit more direct than the 3rd gen, even though this, you don't have anything to brag about handling and driving dynamics on road. Off-road is where this thing really shines, and I definitely do plan on taking it off-roading in the next few weeks, and I'm definitely going to show you guys that video. When you're just driving normally, the engine is very smooth when it puts its power down. It doesn't thrash you around like some other cars. It has more low-end and mid-range torque and just horsepower more than high-end, so it's not really an engine that likes to get wound out that much. It's also just because it's paired to this 5-speed auto. Early 4th gens actually had a 4-speed auto, which is definitely something lethargic to today's standards. So you might be wondering, how reliable are these things? Now, 4Runners are known to be one of the most reliable SUVs in the world, but you know, like any car, any used car especially, there's always some things to look for. In my opinion, there's only 3 main things that you should be looking for when you're looking at a used 4Runner. This one in particular has 220,000 miles, and we were lucky enough to only have put in, well, my dad was lucky enough to only have put in $800, and that was mostly stuff that he didn't even need to do. The first common thing to look for is the frame. Now, this one was a Jersey truck, and I was already assuming that the frame would kind of be a little bit iffy, but we were lucky enough to see that the frame was pretty much untouched. I guess it was garage kept or something, but get under your trucks and check your frames. The second thing to take notice of if you're looking at a V8 4Runner is the timing belt. Those typically go bad at around 90 to 100,000 miles, sometimes maybe even less or maybe even more depending on which vehicle it is. The V6 4Runners have timing chains, so you don't have to worry about those at all. With the timing belt or timing chain, the water pump is also something that may go bad eventually. Well, it will go bad eventually. And if that does start leaking, take care of it immediately because that might lead into some bad cooling issues. The third and last thing that I would check is your suspension and steering components, especially around the front end, like ball joints, tie rods, and stuff like that. Just make sure that you and your 4Runner are safe. A 2005 Toyota 4Runner V6 Limited with 4-wheel drive would run you about $36,345 back in 2005. Pretty much on par with a loaded Explorer or Pilot EXL back in the day.